An alien Indian hailing from afar, who in the town of Quito did abide, and neighbor claimed to be of Bogota, there having come, and know not by what way, did with him speak and solemnly announce a country rich in emeralds and gold. Also among the things which them engaged, a certain king he told of, who, disrobed, upon a lake was wont, aboard a raft, to make oblations, as himself had seen, his regal form overspread with fragrant oil, on which was laid a coat of powdered gold, from sole of foot unto his highest brow, resplendent as the beaming of the sun. Arrivals without end, he further said, were there to make rich votive offerings of golden trinkets, and of emeralds rare, and divers other of their ornaments. And worthy credence these things he affirmed, the soldiers light of heart and well content, then dubbed him El Dorado, and the name by countless ways was spread throughout the world. With this ceremony the new ruler was received, and was recognized as Lord and King. This is the ceremony that became the famous El Dorado, which has taken so many lives and fortunes. El Dorado is the term used by Europeans to describe a tribal chief of the Muisca native people of Cundinamarca, Colombia, South America, who, as an initiation rite, covered himself with gold dust and dove into Lake Guatavita. In the mythology of the Muisca, Minya the gold, or golden color, represents the energy contained in the trinity of Chinamagagua, which constitutes the creative power of everything that exists. Chinamagagua is considered to be one of the creators of the universe in this mythology. Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo, a Spanish historian who lived in 1478 to 1557, also wrote of the ceremony. He went about all covered with powdered gold, as casually as if it were powdered salt, for it seemed to him that to wear any other finery was less beautiful, and that to put on ornaments or arms made of gold working by hammering, stamping, or by other means, was a vulgar and common thing. The Spaniards started calling this golden chief El Dorado, the Gilded One, or the Golden Man, coined by conquistador Sebastian de Benalcazar in 1535. The ceremony supposedly ended in the late 15th century when El Dorado and his subjects were conquered by another tribe. However, because of the stories of El Dorado, in 1537, conquistador Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada and his army of 800 men turned away from their mission to find an overland route to Peru, and instead up into the Andean homeland of the Muisca for the first time. The Spaniards, when they came and overtook the towns, had found so much gold among the natives along the continent's northern coast that they believed there had to be a place of great wealth somewhere in the interior, spreading the word that El Dorado was near. The lust for gold spans all eras, races, and nationalities. To possess any amount of gold seems to ignite an insatiable desire to obtain more. The Spaniards didn't find El Dorado, but they did find Lake Guatavita, and tried to drain it in 1545. Headed by Lazaro Fonte and Hernan Perez de Quesada, using a bucket chain of laborers, they were able to lower the lake's level by about 3 meters. Not really draining it, but it was enough to find hundreds of pieces of gold along the lake's edge, with a value of 3,000 to 4,000 pesos, or approximately 100,000 US dollars today. But the presumed fabulous treasure in the deeper water was beyond their reach. However, they still believed a hidden city of immense wealth existed. Other attempts were made at draining Lake Guatavita. In 1580, Bogota business entrepreneur Antonio del Sepulveda cut a notch deep into the rim of the lake, which managed to reduce the water level by 20 meters before collapsing and killing many of the laborers. A share of the findings, consisting of various golden ornaments, jewelry, and armor, was sent to King Philip II of Spain. Sepulveda's discovery came to approximately 12,000 pesos. It was way later in 1801 when Alexander von Humboldt, a Prussian geographer, naturalist, and explorer, made a visit to Guatavita, and that on his return to Paris, he calculated from the findings of Sepulveda's efforts that Guatavita could offer up as much as $300 million worth of gold. In 1898, the company for the exploitation of the Lagoon of Guatavita was formed and taken over by Contractors Limited of London, and they made a complete attempt to find the wealth within the lake. The lake was drained by a tunnel that emerged in the center of the lake, and was drained to a depth of about 4 feet of mud and slime. Unfortunately, this made it impossible to explore, and when the mud had dried, sitting and being baked in the sun, it had set like concrete, ruining the full excavation. A haul of only 500 pounds was found and auctioned in London. Some of these artifacts were donated to the British Museum. The company filed for bankruptcy and ultimately ceased activities in 1929. Finally, in 1965, the Colombian government designated the lake as a protected area. Private salvage operations, including attempts to drain the lake, are now illegal. Through the centuries, this passion gave rise to the enduring tale of a city of gold. Searches continued into the 16th and 17th centuries, as Europeans were still fascinated by and ignorant of the New World. Other expeditions were made with interesting results. For instance, in 1540, Gonzalo Pizarro, the younger half-brother of Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador who toppled the Incan Empire in Peru, was made the governor of the province of Quito in northern Ecuador. Shortly after taking lead in Quito, Gonzalo learned from many of the natives of a valley far to the east, rich in both cinnamon and gold. He banded together 340 soldiers and about 4,000 natives in 1541, and led them eastward down the Rio Coca and the Rio Napo. Francisco de Orellana accompanied Pizarro on his expedition as his lieutenant. Gonzalo quit, however, after many of the soldiers and natives had died from hunger, disease, and periodic attacks by hostile natives. He ordered Orellana to continue downstream, where he eventually made it to the Atlantic Ocean. The expedition found neither cinnamon nor gold, but Orellana is credited with discovering the Amazon River. Another Spaniard named Juan Martin WR was captured and held for a time by natives. He claimed to have been given gold and taken to a city named Manoa, where a rich and powerful Inca ruled. By now, the eastern Andes had been fairly well explored, and the largest unknown space that remained was the mountains of Guyana in northeast South America. Explorers conceived of a great kingdom there, which had split off from the mighty and rich Inca of Peru. It was alleged that the city of El Dorado, now often called Manoa as well, was on the shores of a great lake named Parim, or Parima. Many men tried to make it to the lake and the city during the period from about 1580 to 1750. Matters were only made worse for explorers because of maps that supposedly had El Dorado illustrated on them, seemingly confirming El Dorado's location. The mythical city of El Dorado on Lake Parima was marked on English and other maps until its existence was disproved by Alexander von Humboldt during his Latin America expedition between the years 1799 and 1804. The greatest of the seekers who used such maps was Sir Walter Raleigh. He may be taken as the great typical figure of the age of Queen Elizabeth. Courtier and statesman, soldier and sailor, scientist and man of letters, he engaged in almost all the main lines of public activity in his time, and was distinguished in all of them. He made 2 expeditions to South America, one in 1595 and also 1617. On his first expedition, he had set many goals for himself while trying to reach Lake Parima in the highlands of Guyana, such as wanting to find the mythical city of El Dorado, which he suspected to be an actual Indian city named Manoa. Also, he hoped to establish an English presence in the southern hemisphere that could compete with that of the Spanish. Finally, he wanted to create an English settlement in the land called Guyana, and to try to reduce commerce between the natives and Spaniards. Unfortunately, he was not successful in finding El Dorado, but he did record a wealth of information in his first expedition in his work titled The Discovery of Guyana. In 1617, he returned to the New World on a second expedition, this time with his son, Walter Raleigh. Raleigh, by now an old man of 63, stayed behind in a camp on the island of Trinidad. During the expedition, Raleigh's men, under the command of Lawrence Keymis, attacked the Spanish outpost of Santo Tomé de Guyana, or San Tomé, on the Orinoco River against Raleigh's orders and in violations of peace treaties with Spain, as well as other agreements with the English, as Raleigh had been under a suspended death sentence for treason since 1603 and had been instructed to not attack or harass Spanish colonies or shipping. Raleigh's son, Wat, was the first casualty of the brief skirmish, killed by a musket ball. One other Englishman and 2 Spaniards were also killed before the Spanish garrison fled. Expeditions for El Dorado were unsuccessful and were a complete disaster. Eric Klingelhofer, an archaeologist at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, says Raleigh was furious at a survivor who informed him of Watt's death and accused the survivor of letting his son be killed. The man supposedly went into his cabin on the ship and killed himself. Upon Raleigh's return to England, King James ordered for him to be beheaded for disobeying orders to avoid conflict with the Spanish, among his other convictions. He was executed in 1618. According to many biographers, for instance Raleigh Trevelyan, in his 2002 biography Sir Walter Raleigh, Raleigh's final words, as he lay ready for the axe to fall, were "Strike, man, strike." So is there an El Dorado? As a reality, El Dorado was a dud, never existing except in the fevered minds of gold-crazy conquistadors, who had dollar signs in their eyes. Where could it possibly be? Practically speaking, the best answer is nowhere. The city of gold never existed. Historically, however, the best answer is Lake Guatavita, near the Colombian city of Bogota. But it is possible that Lake Guatavita wasn't the only lake, or even the most important lake, where the Muisca rite of passage was performed. Meanwhile, the name of El Dorado has come to be used metaphorically of any place where wealth could be rapidly acquired. It is also sometimes used as a metaphor to represent an ultimate prize or holy grail that someone might spend one's life seeking, which makes it bear similarity to other myths such as the Fountain of Youth, as well as Atlantis and Shangri-La. It can be a figure of speech to represent something much sought after that may not even exist, or at least may not ever be found. It endures because you want it to be true. Edgar Allan Poe even wrote a poem in 1849, which gives an eerie clue that people may be willing to follow if they wish for El Dorado to actually exist. Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, if you seek for El Dorado.